I'm Michael Odom.
I'm Brandon Shields.
And I'm Craig Thomas, and you're watching the Midweek Crunch here at JacksonSun.com.
Welcome into the Midweek Crunch here at JacksonSun.com. I am sports writer Michael Odom, along here with sports writer Brandon Shields. Craig Thomas is away on assignment, so he will not be joining us this week to share his...
The Ohio Valley Conference is having basketball media day still during football season. Come on, y'all.
It's basketball time. It's coming. If you've been watching JacksonSun.com, the basketball stories are starting to trickle in.
Okay.
But here we are, we're getting ready for Week 10 of the high school football season. A lot of big games coming up, dealing with playoffs. Playoffs begin in 2 weeks. So we're going to start off this week's show with a little segment called Playoff Play-In Games, where we're going to look at some games across West Tennessee that deal with teams winning or losing, getting into the playoffs. And we're going to start that off with Dyersburg in Region 7 3A. Taking on South Gibson. Dyersburg right now is 2-3 in region play. South Gibson's 3-2. You know, I could see where we're getting this. If Liberty's going to be 1, Milan's 2. It seems like teams like South Gibson, Dyersburg, and Westie are kind of fighting for those 3-4 spots.
They are fighting for those spots, and I wouldn't necessarily call Milan 2 yet, because South Gibson does have a shot at playing its way into a tie for second. And if they were to beat Milan next week in Week 11, that would give them the tiebreaker. But first, before they get there, they've got to play Dyersburg this week, and I think that's the game that you're going to this week. And, this is going to be a big game. Dyersburg started out slow. They played all the good teams in the region early on, lost to them, so they've been kind of digging themselves out of a hole. And so far, they're digging pretty well. Next up for them is South Gibson. They're both coming in with 2 losses in the region.
No, Dyersburg's got 3.
Okay, Dyersburg's got 3. South Gibson's got 2. If Dyersburg were to win this game, they would pull into a tie with South Gibson in the region for, I guess technically it'd be for 4th place, and then Dyersburg would own the tiebreaker over South Gibson, and South Gibson not out of the playoffs at that point, but they're definitely needing some help to get back in there, and a win over Milan next week would be pretty needed next week.
You know, having seen South Gibson last week, I think the key is going to be they can't give up big plays. You know, last week against Liberty, they gave up 7 plays for 20 yards or more and 17 for 10 to 20 yards. And, you know, when Liberty was able to see the holes, it was not short gains. It was they were gone.
Definitely.
And so that's going to be a key. Another game that we're looking at comes from Region 7 4A. It's Chester County, sitting at 4-2 in region play, travels down to Brownsville to Haywood to play the Tomcats, who are 3-3. Both of these teams are coming off losses last week. Chester County lost at home to Hardin County, while Haywood lost on the road at Northside.
Took it on the chin, 34-0. Greg and I were talking about this on our radio show this week, and if I've got it figured up right, and I could be wrong, but if I've got it figured up right, if Chester County wins and Haywood loses, then Chester County is for sure in the playoffs. Haywood is for sure out. And Chester County doesn't want to lose this game, because then they've got to play Northside next week for a shot to get into the playoffs. And right now, Northside's just playing really good ball. Haywood, if they were to lose this game, it'd be their 4th loss, plus they would be behind Hardin County, Northside, Crockett, Chester, and Lexington. Well, not behind Crockett. They beat Crockett, but behind Lexington. 4 teams as far as tiebreakers go. So they pretty much be shut out of the playoffs. So winning this game isn't necessary for them.
You know, that's really key. You know, Haywood's lost 3 in a row. Hardin County, Oakland, and then Northside.
It seems like they played another team kind of in there that after the Hardin County game. Yeah, it's at least 3 out of 4 games.
So I mean, this is one where Haywood's got to find some confidence, and you know, a loss here wouldn't be good for the Tomcats. Right. One other game that we're looking at, playoff play-ins. Houston County at 6-2, 3-2 in region play. They travel to Brewston to take on the Tigers, who are 5-3, 3-2 in region play. These are 2 of 3 teams sitting at 3-2 in the region, along with Clarksville Academy. Mm-hmm. If Huntingdon and Wayne County are going to be 1-2 these are playing for those 3-4 spots.
Right, they are, and Brewston's already got a loss, I think, to Clarksville Academy already in the season, and then they play Huntington next week. So a win in this game is pretty necessary for them to win, because I don't know if Brewston, mainly on depth, I think as far as if we just match up starting 11 versus starting 11, I think Brewston is good enough to compete with Huntington, but I think the depth issue would probably take over in the second half, and Huntington would pull away from Brewston next week. I'm not exactly sure how large Houston County's roster is, but I know that Huntington beat them pretty badly, and I know Wayne County beat them pretty badly. So, and Brewston competed for a while with Wayne County when they lost some earlier in the season. So, Brewston's got a chance in this one, but they need to take as much advantage of that chance as they can.
All right, that wraps up this segment of the Midweek Crunch. When we come back, we're going to talk about the big games going into Week 10 of the high school football season.
You don't work out often, do you?
No, it's just too exhausting, and I don't have time.
It's exhausting, but it has its benefits, especially when you get older.
What kind of benefits?
Exercising helps you sleep better, helps your bone, muscles, and joints to grow properly, helps your stress levels, reduces your risk of chronic disease and type 2 diabetes. It helps lower your blood pressure. You'll feel better about yourself and have a good output on life.
Wow, that would really benefit me. Maybe I should start working out.
6 reasons to commit to be fit.
Welcome back into the Midweek Crunch here at JacksonSun.com. We're going to talk about some of the big games going into Week 10 of the high school football season. We're going to kick that off with 2 undefeated teams in Class 1A, as Huntington, 8-0, 5-0 in region play, will travel to Wayne County in Waynesboro, who is 8-0, 5-0 also. Got to be one of the marquee matchups.
Yeah, it's got to be. It's number 2 versus number 5 in the state in Class 1A. There's not going to be many undefeated matchups left in the regular season, at least. So to have one in Week 10 obviously is going to be a big game. Plus, when you look at the history of these two teams, they haven't played a lot over the years, but they've played some big games in the playoffs. I was there the last time they played in 2011 in a very memorable finish to that game in which Wayne County had to go for it on 4th and 1 from their own 30 or something like that. Barely get the ball, or barely make the first down. Then they have a long play to score a touchdown with like less than a minute left, and Huntington had entered that game undefeated. This was the state quarterfinals. 2 weeks later, Wayne County goes on and beat South Pittsburgh pretty badly to win the state championship. So you got to think that was probably a really good chance for Huntington to win a state championship that they felt like they were robbed of. Talking with Cade Pearson, Huntington's quarterback this year, last week after that win over Clarksville Academy, he talked about, he's like, I was in 6th grade that year. He said, I remember being in the stands watching that game. He said, I'm looking forward to this game since we found out that they were going to be in our region, just because want to win for that game too. And Eric Swinson said, their head coach, he talks about that's one of those losses that'll keep a coach up sleepless night just thinking about it long after the season's ended. So this is definitely, there may be some kind of like demon exorcism going on in this game if Huntington can win. But the fact of the matter is, it's 2015 now. There's a region championship on the line. There's a little more home field advantage possibilities in the playoffs for the winner of this game. They're both going to be at home for the first round no matter what. They're the top 2. But it's going to come down to if Huntington can stop Wayne County's big backs. Eric Swinson was telling me that Wayne County's backs are bigger than their linemen. So go figure that one out. But the good part about that is that Huntington has really excellent line play. And that's really, when you look at Huntington's good teams over the last few years, line play is kind of where they've really dominated and where they've really been able to have those long playoff runs and have a lot of success. So they've got a definite shot at winning a region championship this week.
Huntington's gone through most of the season without any close games.
Right.
Is this, you got to make sure that you focus. You can't just underestimate what Wayne County can do. You got to make sure, that this team's going to be able to compete with you, and you can't look at these last 8 games that you've played and think we're going to do it again.
Well, Wayne County's had a similar season. They have had one close game. Y'all may remember in week 2, Scottsdale had Wayne County. Obviously, they didn't have them beat, but they were on their way to winning. Then a couple of bad calls, turnovers. Wayne County gets the ball and scores a couple of quick touchdowns, but they come back, win 28-27. There's a lot of fans at Huntington who think, okay, surely we're better than Scotts Hill. And if Scotts Hill is good enough to nearly beat Wayne County, surely we are too. So they can't, like you said, they can't underestimate Wayne County too much, because there's a reason why they are 8-0. There is a reason why they're able to pull out wins like that. And their quarterback is Coach Rice, the head coach. He's been the head coach for Wayne County for a few years now. He's his youngest son and possibly his best athlete. So they got to be able to watch out for him too and account for him on all plays.
We go from one game going for a region championship to another as Camden, who's 4-4, 4-0 in region play, travels down to Fairview, an opponent that they're familiar with. They've been in the district with them the past couple years. Fairview is 6-2, 4-0. This is a Camden team that when they play in region play, they've been tough to beat. Outside of region play is a different story.
Well, first off, before I get started talking to this, I do want to assure everybody we will talk about games on this side of the Tennessee River going on. But yeah, Camden at Fairview. 2 weeks ago, Fairview beat Sycamore, who was kind of the third team, kind of competing for that region championship. Last week, Camden beat them, and they were both pretty close games. But for the most part, Camden's pretty much been rolling through this region so far. They hadn't won a game outside of region play, but they're doing what they need to do inside the region. Fairview, one of those traditional programs. Usually, when Milan gets to the semifinals, they have to beat Fairview in the quarterfinals to get there. So there's a lot of tradition there, but they're not as experienced as a typical Fairview team is. A little bit younger. They had a good team last year. I think that's who Milan beat in the quarterfinals last year to get to the semifinals. They were a pretty senior-laden team. They're not as senior-laden this year. But we're also in week 10. So they've nearly got a full regular season under their belts at this point. Anybody who was new, but still, Camden's. They kind of seem to be getting into their groove that we expected them to. Deshaun Brown's rushing for a lot of yards. It seems like they're relying a little more on that ground game than maybe what they were planning on doing, because they do have Hayden Abernathy, quarterback, who's a good passer and has some guys to catch it. But they're really kind of going back to that run game. And that's really when Camden's good, when they're running the ball. And if they can continue to do that and do that with a lot of success, I like their chances of bringing home a region championship.
All right, the next game we're going to talk about is actually one that I kind of had my fingers crossed that you would send me to, just because it really intrigues me. It's a non-region game, but I think it's very important for momentum at this point of the season. Scotts Hill, who's 5-3, coming off of a region loss, comes to Jackson to take on the TCA Lions, who are 3-5, 2-2 right now. I know it intrigues me, but why do you consider that a big game?
Well, the last couple of years, we've seen Scotts Hill kind of be on the rise as a program. They were in the same district as TCA before this year, and last year Scotts Hill finished 4th in the district. They felt like they should have beaten Riverside to finish 3rd if they had done that. They competed with Adamsville and TCA really well for 3 quarters before kind of falling behind there late. And that made them feel pretty good going into the playoffs. We can compete with those type of teams. Surely we can win a couple of games, and they did. This year, they're coming in, and there's probably going to be a lot of people who think Scotts Hill may be the favorite going into this game because they have a pretty potent offense that's scoring a lot of points. Plus, they have the leading tackler that we're going to talk about here in a few minutes. In West Tennessee, Drake Thompson has a lot of over 100 tackles going into last week. We hadn't turned in this past week's stats, so it's probably up close to 120 by now. But the question is, can Scotts Hill's defense stop Andrew Goldsmith? Not many defenses have stopped Goldsmith this year. I guess The closest one, the defense that's held Goldsmith to the fewest yards this year would be McKenzie, but let's put an asterisk next to that one since Goldsmith only played one full quarter. So can they stop Andrew Goldsmith enough to outscore TCA's offense? If they could, this could go down as Scottsdale's biggest win in program history.
You know, I know you're going to talk about a trap game later. I think this could be a trap game for TCA because looking at Week 11, they play a Jackson Christian team that nobody's really talking about until last week. You know, they beat McKenzie. Now they're kind of in the front seat of getting the number 2 seed of their region. And so Week 11, TCA, JCS, you know, city rivals, you know, but TCA can't overlook Scotts Hill and know that, you know, Scotts Hill's got the potential to beat them.
Definitely.
One other game that we're going to talk about in big games is going back to Region 7-3A. It seems like we talk a lot of 7-3A and 7-4A. They're big.
They're
region.
big. There's a lot of teams. There's a lot of good teams. So yeah, if you don't like them, get over it.
Milan at 4-1 goes on the road to Jackson also to take on Southside, who's 2-3 in region play and kind of reeling at the moment with 3 straight losses.
Yeah. Started off winning their first 5 games. They've lost their last 3 against the tougher competition. Plus, there's the added thing about not having quarterback Cade Willingham, who is just a few yards shy of passing for 2,000 yards this year. He suffered a concussion at Westview last week. So Southside's kind of behind the 8 ball going into this game. Milan's a good team. They had their bye week last week. They've got J.P. Porter back this week from everything I've heard. Their starting running back who went out with like a hairline fracture in his hairline fracture in his ankle that was broken in week 1 at Trenton Peabody. So he hadn't played since week 1. So, you know, there's always a wonder in the 3 losses that they have suffered, would he have been a factor in the second half against Peabody? Would he have been a factor against Liberty? And I don't know if he would have been a factor against Huntington as badly as they played that night. But, you know, he may have been and, you know, could have changed things around. So things are not looking good for Southside, but they've still got a little bit of pride. They still got, they still got the playoffs to play for. I mean, they got 3 losses. They need to win this one if they want to stay in playoff contention. And then they got Liberty next week. So, you know, they got motivation to play well. One thing that could work in their favor with this concussion for Willingham is how, you know, who do they put in there in that spot? How much does it change their offense? Milan has no game film on how to defend that. So it could work out in a way to their favor.
All right, well, that wraps up this segment of the big games across West Tennessee. When we come back, we'll talk about some dynamic duels and some of the top players to look for this week. So we'll be right back at this week's Midweek Crunch.
College life is all about discovery, discovering new opportunities, new ways of thinking and learning, discovering the latest in technology and innovation. A campus lifestyle that will mold you and help you develop into a well-rounded, successful individual. Start your next chapter in life here at UT Martin Jackson Center. Day and evening classes available, 6 bachelor degrees, North Jackson 45 Bypass, UT Martin Jackson Center.
Here we are back at the Midweek Crunch, going into Week 10 of the high school football season. We're going to look at some of the dynamic duels, some of the maybe not marquee games, but games that we think could be very interesting and seeing who's going to come out on top. And we're going to stay right here in the city of Jackson to start off this segment. As we look at Briarcrest coming in at 4-4, they will travel to USJ, who's 7-1 on the season. You know, looking at these, you know, Briarcrest has taken some tough losses, Hernando, Mississippi, you know, some very tough teams. You look at common opponents, ECS, both of them played ECS tight and both of them got wins. So, you know, this could very well be a close match.
It could be. You know, USJ's coming in with the better record, so there may be a few Bruin fans who are thinking, okay, we got this, we're good. Don't think that, y'all. Because, like you said, Hernando, Mississippi, MUS, Christian Brothers, those are the teams that Briarcrest has lost to going into this one. That's not exactly the same caliber of opponents that USJ has beaten, like a Rossville Christian or Tipton Rosemark or somebody like that. I really think that this is going to be a really close game. It's going to be a good game. But it's going to be a tough game, and if USJ were to win this one, it's going to be their biggest win up to this point because so far, and kind of just looking at their schedule, I think their one loss to BGA is against the best team they played so far. I think this win would definitely probably tower over the rest of the wins up to this point. I mean, I just kind of looking at it, I'm thinking maybe the FACS game in week 1. Looking at what they've done since then, maybe the TCA game in week 2 is probably their biggest win up to this point. So they need a good quality win here before the playoffs start. Plus, they got St. George's next week for that district championship. Something else added to this game for a little bit of interest type factor. Who is Briarcrest coach?
Brian Stewart,
former Jackson Christian head coach, the only head football coach in Jackson high school football history to win a state championship. So. Coach Marley and Coach Hardegree will get to see an old friend of theirs and coach against them and thinking about just kind of how well they probably know each other. It could wind up being a good X's and O's type game to watch.
It should be a very interesting one. You know, USC's getting to play at home, and I think that's going to be key. Another big one, you know, 2 teams that are not on top of their region, but they're both going to have playoff spots. They're assured of that is McKenzie, who's 4-4, goes on the road to Riverside, another 4-4 team. This will be a good test, you know, going forward, getting ready for playoffs. You know, are these teams going to be able to compete once we get into the playoffs?
Yeah, you know, there's that old saying, you can't go home again, but somebody forgot to tell McKenzie head coach Wade Comer that before he made the schedule for this year, because he is a Riverside graduate, so he gets to go home this year, gets to go home again this Friday night. Both of these teams, you know, like you said, they're both in the playoffs, but they've been so up and down, both of them. I mean, one week they'll have this really awesome game where they will come out and beat Lewis County by a lot of points, and the next week Riverside will come out and lose to Scotts Hill 52-0. McKenzie will go out and get a big win over TCA. Then a couple weeks later they'll come out and get beat by Jackson Christian, a loss that no one in West Tennessee saw. And not only get beat by them, but get beat by 17 points. So at this point, both of these teams, they have the assurance that they're in the playoffs. Riverside even has a chance of forcing a 3-way tie for first place in their region if things shake out the right way and they were to beat Waverly in week 11. But so they have that assurance. They can play a little loose, play a little relaxed, work on some stuff that they need to work on going into the playoffs. Yeah, at some point they both just got to kind of establish, this is what we're going to do, this is what we're going to do well, and actually go out and do it well. They got 2 more weeks to do that before the playoffs start. So let's see this week who actually comes out and accomplishes that this time around.
Who would have thought that going into week 10 of the season, we'd be talking about Jackson Christian and a home playoff game? But that is a big possibility if they can win out. They're right now 2-1 in region play. 2-1 in region play, and they go on the road this week to Gibson County, who is 0-4 in the region right now at the bottom. In a game that's, you know, should be a Jackson Christian win, or is favorable for them to be able to beat Gibson County. You know, this could be a big night for Jackson Christian and the chances of a home playoff game.
Yeah, it definitely could be. I'll be honest, before the season started, on the radio show, Greg Hammond and I, he kind of pressed me to make some picks for the playoffs coming out of this region, and I picked Gibson County to be number 4. And Jackson Christian was my 3rd out of 3 choices to be that 4th spot. I just wasn't sure if they had it in them to compete with a Halls or Gibson County or a McKenzie. And they have competed and beaten a McKenzie and a Halls, and then they got a chance to beat a Gibson County this week. And they're playing really good. So far, the best football of the season right now. And that's what they need. Gibson County, here's why I think Gibson County has a shot at winning. One, if Jackson Christian comes out and plays like they normally do, Gibson County has a shot at winning. Plus, Gibson County hasn't had their bye week yet. So that means this is their last game of the season. They know it's their last game of the season because we already have the 4 teams out of this region for the playoffs. So they got nothing to lose with this game, so they're going to lay it all out there and try to end on a good note. Jackson Christian is going to do their best to try to spoil that and keep themselves in the conversation for region runner-up.
All right, well, that wraps up the segment of dynamic duels. We're now going to look at some of the top players going into this week, week 10, and we're going to start it off back over there near the Tennessee River as we look at Deshaun Brown, running back for Camden. Big reason why Camden is in a region championship this week. He's rushed for 1,353 yards, 16 touchdowns. You know, he was a special player this year, and he's done it again as a senior.
Yeah, he hadn't had quite the year that he had last year when he rushed for a few yards over 2,400 last year. He could still reach that. I think Camden's going to need a long playoff run and him to have a good game in all those games to come close to it. But he's also been hampered by injuries, and if we look back at their season, at Camden's season, we see kind of that stretch there in the first half where they kind of struggled with non-region games. We'll see that was kind of the time where he didn't play as much. He missed one game completely, and then kind of his carries were limited because of his injury. But he's been playing well the last few weeks, and as long as they can keep him healthy, he should be one. I mean, if they beat Fairview this week, he's going to be a big reason for it.
All right, our second player that you've already talked about him for just a second is Drake Thompson, the leading tackler in West Tennessee from Scottsdale. Already 100 tackles going into week 9 of the season. He's definitely helped this Scottsdale team keep opposing offenses contained.
Yeah, Scottsdale, a lot of the attention they get is on their offense. Their quarterback, Junior Kimmel, he's right behind Southside's Cade Willingham as for leading and passing yards. Evan Russell is one of his top receivers. He's having a good year, not just receiving, but also playing defensive back. There are some other really good players out there that have made this passing offense. And Tommy Browder, the legendary McNary former head coach of McNary, he's their offensive coordinator. They really made him look like a really good offensive coordinator, but he's putting them in good positions. Drake Thompson is kind of a good complement to all that offense because of what he can do from that linebacker position, getting all the tackles that he's gotten. Like I said, we don't know, don't have the stats after the Waverly game last week exactly how many he got, but he went into the week with 103. It's not a stretch to think he's got close to 120, maybe a little more than that by now. We'll read Friday's paper for the Friday morning blitz, and we'll have that updated. But he's just a good, solid player. And if you're going to try to run on Scottsdale, don't run toward Drake Thompson.
Well, you know, I think on Twitter Friday night, one of Scottsdale's students sent us, me and you, a tweet saying that Drake was in beast mode. So he's definitely. I'm sure he had a big game against.
Then he
Waverly.
may have 140 then.
One more player to watch this week is Cameron Oakley at McKenzie, another defensive player. Not only is he big in the tackles, but he's been getting some key takeaways for the Rebels.
Yeah, last year McKenzie had a couple of really good linebackers in Mitch Merrick and DeJohn McNulty, who were two of our leading tacklers last year. And I kind of expected, both of those guys are back, and I expected those to be two among our leaders again this year. And they are. They both got a lot of tackles, but he surpassed them. Cameron Oakley is the leading tackler for McKenzie this year. I don't know if he's benefiting from other teams running away from the other two or what's going on, but he's not only helping in tackles, but he's also got 3 caused fumbles, 1 interception, and 1 fumble recovery to be among the leaders in our takeaways. So he's I'll go ahead and say it here publicly. He's a candidate for Defensive Player of the Year at this point. I'm not saying he's going to win it, but he's definitely in the conversation. And as long as he can keep that play up and McKenzie can kind of keep their offensive play consistent, that could spell the formula for 2 or 3 playoff wins for McKenzie this year again.
So Deshaun Brown, Drake Thompson, and Cameron Oakley, 3 players to watch going into Week 10 of the season. This finishes this segment of the Midweek Crunch. When we come back, we're going to talk about some of the close calls that we think could come out of the games this week, or at least ones that Brandon thinks are close calls.
My name is Justice Faust. I'm a freshman here at Jackson State, and my major is mass communications. The community college really focuses on academics, and that's what I needed. We have the Academic Assistance Center, we have the library, we have the Student Union Building. All of the teachers are helpful. It seems like here at this community college, everybody really cares about getting you to where you need to go.
Jackson State. Stay close. Go far.
Welcome back into this week's Midweek Crunch for Week 10 of the high school football season. We're going to talk about some games that we think could be some close calls going into this week. We're going to start it off back in Region 7 4A as Lexington, who's 6-2 overall, 4-2 in region play, goes on the road to Dyer County, a team that's 3-6, 2-8, but it's a little deceiving. They've been in a lot of close games against some of the better teams in the region, like the 7-point loss to Hardin County at home when they got stopped on the 1-yard line. Why do you think this one could be close to?
You may remember last year where South Gibson finished 2-8, but they were very close to being 7-3, 6-4, somewhere in there. I mean, just losing a lot of those games by one possession or closer. Dyer County is kind of that team in West Tennessee this year, and they have a better team than what a 3-6 record would suggest. But one, they have had problems scoring points early on, so they would play a lot of good teams close. They just couldn't score enough points to beat them. Also, like you said, they're in our best region. So they're playing a Hardin County, then they're playing a Northside, then they're playing a Chester County, then a Haywood. Playing most of these teams pretty close, but still couldn't get over the hump to beat them. I think they'll kind of keep that trend going this week against Lexington. Lexington's got that long trip, so you got to wonder just kind of how that's going to affect their play going into that game. I mean, I don't know how long it is from Lexington to New Bern, but it's got to be at least an hour and a half, if not 2 hours. But it's not the first time Lexington's had a long trip to try to play with these kids. So they should be at least familiar with it, if not used to it. But I still think it's going to be close, but I still think Lexington wins. All
right, next one. Remember the last segment I said once Brandon thinks they're close? Liberty, 8-0, 5-0 overall, will make the trip down to Selmer to take on McNary Central, who is 3-5, 1-4 in region play. And I'm going to start this off with 2 words of why I disagree with you. Chris Johnson.
Oh, that's a good reason to disagree with me. And I'm not saying I think McNary's going to win. I'm not going to say they don't have any chance to win, but I definitely think Liberty is the favorite going into this one. I think anybody outside Selmer who thinks Liberty's not the favorite is apparently not paying attention to football around here this year. I do think this one could be close, though. And there's a few reasons outside of X's and O's I think this could happen. One, McNary is with 4 losses in the region. They're out of the playoffs, so they got 2 games left. They know it. I think they're going to kind of leave it all on the line out there, kind of how I was talking about with Gibson County earlier. Second, Liberty's in the playoffs. They probably they can take 1 loss and still have the region wrapped up because they own the tiebreakers over everybody that kind of is contending for the championship. So 1 more win, boom, Liberty's got the championship. 3. Liberty has an inner-city rival coming up next week against Southside. So they kind of they could be kind of looking ahead to Southside and maybe wanting to shut down that passing game that Southside's been boasting of all week or all season. So this could be a chance for McNary to kind of show up and show Liberty that this is a trap game that y'all didn't see coming. Will it happen? I don't know. Probably not. But you never know. Those of you who are counting McNary out in this one, don't do that quite yet because there's a reason we play these games. Nobody thought Jackson Christian beat McKenzie last week. So
I didn't say that I was counting McNary out. I just said Chris Johnson.
You said it.
Who Chris Johnson is back for the Liberty Crusaders after pretty much being out the past 4 games with an injury, missing a complete game and playing limited in the next 3. So he was a big factor in their win at home over South Gibson with 175 yards rushing. One more game that we think could be a close call. We go back down to the smaller schools as Greenfield, who's 1-5 in region, travels to West Carroll, another team that is 1-5 in region. You know, these two teams really trying to pick up some momentum looking towards next season because they're both out of the playoffs, playing in a very tough region with teams like Union City, Dresden, and Trenton Peabody.
Yeah, we didn't really talk much about Region 7 1A this week because a lot of the bigger teams are playing. A lot of the teams aren't doing so well. Peabody's got the week off. Dresden's got Humboldt. Union City has
The week off.
Do they have? They got their bye week too. So yeah, that's right because they hadn't had their bye week before last week. So yeah. But Greenfield and West Carroll, I think, could be a fun game to watch for anybody that goes and watches that game because, kind of like you said, they're in the same situation. Two small schools, hadn't had the greatest of years. They're not in the playoffs. They're not going to make the playoffs. So at this point, they're playing for pride. Atwood and Greenfield aren't that far away from each other, so there may be a few, friendly type relationships between players on the team or fans on the team that would cause them to kind of want to win this game a little more for a few more bragging rights. So I kind of expect that to happen. Greenfield had hopes of making the playoffs before the season. West Carroll had, I guess they had hopes of making the playoffs too before the season, but they were also, coaching changes and dealing with player deaths before the season, all that stuff. They've dealt with a lot themselves off the field. So both of them have their reasons for wanting to end the season on a good note, and obviously one of them it'll just be it'll be for anybody who's in the stadium. It'll be fun to watch them kind of see which one actually does accomplish that.
All right, well, this wraps up this week's midweek crunch. Going into week 10, we have one more week of the high school football season before we hit playoffs, and after that, we hit basketball.
Well, we'll be hitting basketball before the end of the playoffs, I guess, right?
Yep.
Okay.
So come back, join us next week. Check out the website throughout the week for stories, photos, anything you need to know going into the high school football week 10.